The person everyone thought had no power was the very person who had the authority to change everything. On a quiet Sunday morning in Arlington, Virginia, the sound of a sport bike moving through the streets carried no warning, no mystery, and no sign that the rider would soon become the center of a moment nobody would forget. Vanessa Carter was not looking for attention. She was simply enjoying a rare morning away from the pressure of her demanding career. After a long week inside courtrooms filled with difficult decisions and serious responsibilities, she valued the simple freedom of riding her motorcycle through familiar roads. To anyone watching from the outside, Vanessa appeared to be just another rider enjoying a peaceful day. She wore protective riding gear, followed the rules of the road, and carried herself with quiet confidence. What nobody nearby knew was that the woman on the sport bike was not an ordinary rider. She was a federal judge who had spent years studying the law, protecting fairness, and making decisions that affected people's lives. But on that morning, her title was hidden behind a helmet and a simple choice to enjoy a normal day. Imagine standing there and seeing only what was visible. A motorcycle, a rider you do not recognize, a person who does not fit the picture you expected. Sometimes, the biggest misunderstandings begin in those small moments when people decide they already know the story before hearing it. Officer Michael Reynolds was patrolling the area when he noticed Vanessa riding through the neighborhood. He had years of experience as a police officer and believed he had developed strong instincts. He trusted his ability to notice situations that seemed unusual. But instincts can only show what is on the surface. They cannot reveal the years of dedication, sacrifice, and responsibility hidden behind a person's appearance. Michael did not know Vanessa's background. He did not know about the courtroom decisions, the legal knowledge, or the professional journey that had brought her to that quiet morning. He only saw what was in front of him. Vanessa, meanwhile, had no idea that a simple ride was about to become a test of patience and understanding. She had spent her career believing that every person deserved to be treated fairly, and that facts should always come before assumptions. She carried that belief with her everywhere, even outside the courtroom. The morning sunlight reflected off the motorcycle as Vanessa continued down the road, unaware that someone was already forming a conclusion about her. The situation had not become complicated because of what she did. It became complicated because of what someone else believed they saw. And sometimes the most powerful stories begin with a person being underestimated. Michael believed he understood the situation in front of him. He believed he was simply doing his job. But he had no idea that the person he was about to question was someone who represented the very system he served. He did not know that behind the helmet was a woman whose decisions carried more authority than anyone around her realized. He only knew what he could see. And soon, he would discover that what people see is often only the smallest part of the truth. The most important moments are not always created by what people say. Sometimes they are created by what people assume before a single word is spoken. On that quiet morning in Arlington, Virginia, Vanessa Carter continued her ride without knowing that someone had already created a story about her. She was simply enjoying a few peaceful hours away from the courtroom, unaware that her identity, her career, and her years of service were invisible to everyone around her. Officer Michael Reynolds watched the motorcycle move through the area and felt that something about the situation stood out to him. He had spent years working in law enforcement, and he believed his experience helped him recognize situations that needed attention. But experience can only reveal what is visible, cannot reveal what is hidden beneath the surface. Michael did not know that Vanessa had spent decades building a reputation based on fairness and responsibility. He did not know that she had studied the law, served the public, and carried decisions that affected far more than her own life. To him, she was simply a person on a sport bike. To Vanessa, she was simply a person enjoying a normal morning. The difference between those two perspectives would soon become the center of the entire situation. As Michael approached the area where Vanessa had stopped, he prepared to ask questions. He believed he was following a normal procedure. Vanessa noticed the interaction and remained calm. She understood that moments like this were often shaped by how people responded. She had spent her professional life inside courtrooms where emotions could become intense, but facts always mattered more than assumptions. She knew the importance of patience, especially when a situation was still developing. Michael began asking about the motorcycle and the circumstances surrounding her ride. Vanessa answered respectfully and clearly. She did not immediately mention her position as a federal judge. She did not believe her title should be the reason someone treated her differently. In her mind, respect should not depend on a person's occupation, status, or influence. It should be given because every person deserves dignity. That quiet decision would become one of the most important parts of the story, because the truth was not only about who Vanessa was. It was about whether the system would treat her fairly before knowing her identity. Nearby, the moment continued unnoticed by most people passing through the area. They saw a police officer speaking with a motorcycle rider, but they did not see the larger meaning behind it. They did not know that one person was about to learn a lesson about assumptions, while another person was about to demonstrate the strength of remaining calm under pressure. Michael believed he was evaluating a situation. He did not realize the situation was also revealing something about the way people make judgments. The difference between justice and assumption often comes down to one simple choice: whether someone is willing to learn the truth before deciding what they believe. And as the conversation continued, the hidden details of Vanessa Carter's life remained just moments away from being revealed. Sometimes the most powerful moments are the ones where a person chooses patience instead of reacting to a misunderstanding. On that morning in Arlington, Virginia, Vanessa Carter remained calm as Officer Michael Reynolds continued asking questions. She understood that the situation was not only about the motorcycle. It was about how quickly people could create conclusions when they only saw a small part of someone's life. Michael believed he was simply gathering information, but he did not realize that the conversation was revealing something much deeper about perception and fairness. Vanessa answered every question clearly. She explained where she was coming from and provided the information she was asked to provide. Her tone remained respectful because she believed that every interaction was an opportunity to demonstrate the values she carried with her every day. She had spent years inside courtrooms where decisions had serious consequences. She knew that fairness required listening before judging. She knew that facts mattered more than first impressions. But Michael was still looking at the situation through the limited information in front of him. He did not know the woman standing there had dedicated her career to the legal system. He did not know that Vanessa Carter was someone whose professional decisions carried the responsibility of protecting justice. He only saw a rider on a sport bike and a situation he believed needed closer attention. Vanessa noticed something important during the interaction. Michael was not asking questions because he knew her. He was asking questions because he did not know her. That difference mattered. She understood that people often react to what they see before they understand what they do not see. Instead of becoming frustrated, she allowed the process to continue. She wanted the truth to appear naturally, not because of her title, but because the truth should be enough on its own. As the conversation continued, a few small details began to stand out. Michael noticed the confidence in Vanessa's responses. He noticed that she remained composed even when the situation could have easily become uncomfortable. He began to sense that there was more to this moment than he originally believed. But he still had no idea. How much more? Nearby, the sounds of the city continued as usual. Cars moved along the streets, people continued with their morning routines, and the world around them remained unaware that a simple encounter was slowly becoming something much bigger. Vanessa looked like an ordinary person having an ordinary morning. That was exactly why the moment carried so much meaning. Her identity was hidden, not because she was trying to deceive anyone, but because she believed respect should exist before recognition. Michael continued following what he believed was the correct process. He did not realize that the person standing in front of him understood the law on a level he could never have imagined. The conversation reached a point where additional verification was needed. A few details would soon be checked, and those details would reveal the truth behind Vanessa Carter's quiet confidence. The moment before that discovery felt ordinary, but sometimes ordinary moments are where the biggest lessons begin. Michael thought he was uncovering information about a motorcycle rider. He did not realize he was about to uncover the identity of someone who represented the very principles he was expected to protect. The truth is often closest when people stop looking at appearances and start looking at facts. On that morning in Arlington, Virginia, the conversation between Vanessa Carter and Officer Michael Reynolds reached a moment where more information was needed. Michael believed he was following a normal procedure, but he did not realize that the next few minutes would completely change his understanding of the person standing in front of him. Vanessa remained composed as the verification process continued. She did not rush to explain her position or use her title as a shortcut. She believed that the law should work the same way for everyone. A person should not receive respect only after others discover their importance. Respect should come first. Michael began checking the available information connected to the situation. At first, everything appeared ordinary. There was a rider, a motorcycle, and a conversation that seemed like many others he had experienced before. But then one detail changed the entire direction of the moment. The information connected to Vanessa Carter revealed a name that carried significant meaning. Michael looked again, making sure he understood what he was seeing. The woman standing beside the sport bike was not someone whose story could be explained by a quick assumption. She was a federal judge. For a moment, the confidence Michael had carried earlier disappeared. The situation he thought he understood was suddenly much larger than he imagined. The person he had viewed as simply a rider was someone who had spent years representing the principles of fairness, responsibility, and justice. Vanessa did not celebrate the reaction. She did not use the moment to embarrass anyone. Instead, she remained exactly as she had been from the beginning. Calm, respectful, patient. That was what made the moment powerful. Her authority was not shown through anger or demands. It was shown through the way she handled being misunderstood. Michael began to reflect on the difference between seeing someone and truly knowing someone. He realized that the information he had at the beginning was incomplete. He had seen a motorcycle and a person he did not recognize, but he had not seen the years of work, dedication, and service behind that person. The discovery created a quiet shift in the atmosphere. The situation was no longer about a traffic encounter. It became a lesson about perception and responsibility. Vanessa understood that this moment represented something larger than herself. She knew that many people are judged by what others see before their full story is known. Her experience in the legal system had taught her that every detail matters and every person deserves to be heard. Michael now faced a difficult realization. The person he had been evaluating was someone who understood the law at the highest level. The person he thought needed to explain herself had spent years making decisions about justice for others. But the greatest lesson was not that Vanessa Carter held an important title. The greatest lesson was that she should have been treated with dignity before anyone knew that title. The truth had finally appeared, but the real question remained. What would people learn from the moment when they discovered that the person they underestimated was the person they should have respected from the beginning? The moment a person's identity is revealed can change the way everyone sees the situation, but it can also reveal something even more important: how people choose to act before they know the truth. In Arlington, Virginia, Officer Michael Reynolds stood quietly as he processed the information that had just changed his understanding of Vanessa Carter. The woman he had approached as an unfamiliar motorcycle rider was actually a federal judge, someone whose professional life was built around the same principles of fairness and responsibility that guided his own work. But Vanessa did not focus on the surprise in Michael's reaction. She focused on the lesson hidden inside the moment. She knew that the most important issue was not her title. It was the fact that every person deserved to be treated with respect before anyone knew their background. Michael looked back on the interaction from the beginning. He remembered how quickly he had formed an impression. He remembered how little he truly knew when he first saw her. He had relied on what was visible, but the most important details about Vanessa were the ones he could not see. Her education, her experience, her commitment to justice, her years of service. All of those things existed before the moment anyone discovered her position. Vanessa understood that this situation was bigger than one conversation on a quiet street. She had spent her career inside courtrooms where decisions required patience, careful consideration, and a commitment to facts. She knew that assumptions could create mistakes, and mistakes could affect real people. That was why she chose not to respond with anger. She chose to respond with the same principles she applied every day in her work. Michael began to understand that authority was not always visible. A person did not need a uniform, a badge, or a title displayed in front of them to deserve dignity. Sometimes, the people who appear ordinary are carrying responsibilities that others cannot. Imagine. The discovery of Vanessa's identity created an uncomfortable reflection for everyone involved. It was not only about what happened in that moment. It was about how easily people can decide who someone is before learning the truth. The situation became a reminder that fairness should not depend on status. It should exist from the beginning. As the conversation continued, Michael became more aware of the responsibility that came with his position. He understood that every interaction was an opportunity to either strengthen trust or weaken it. Vanessa's calm response showed him that true power was not about demanding recognition. True power was about remaining grounded when others failed to see the complete picture. The people nearby who learned what had happened also began to think differently. They realized that the most important part of a person's story is often hidden beneath the surface. The motorcycle was only a small detail. The real story was about a woman who carried the responsibility of justice and a moment that revealed why understanding must come before judgment. In the end, Vanessa did not need to prove that she belonged. Her life had already proven it. The only thing that changed was that others finally saw what had been there all along. The truth had changed the way everyone viewed the encounter, but the most important part of the story was not the moment when Vanessa Carter's identity was revealed. It was what happened afterward. In Arlington, Virginia, a simple interaction on a quiet street became a reminder that power is not always visible and that fairness should never depend on knowing someone's position. Officer Michael Reynolds continued thinking about the situation long after Vanessa had left. He replayed the conversation in his mind and remembered the first impression he had formed. He remembered seeing a person on a sport bike and believing he understood the situation before he knew the person behind the helmet. Now, he understood how incomplete that picture had been. Vanessa Carter was not defined by the motorcycle she rode or the clothing she wore that morning. She was defined by years of dedication, service, and commitment to the principles she represented. Being a federal judge was not what gave her value. It was simply one part of the person she had already become. Vanessa had spent her career reminding others that every decision required careful attention to facts. She knew that assumptions could create unfair outcomes, and she knew that people deserved the opportunity to be understood. That was why she handled the situation with patience from beginning to end. She did not need to raise her voice to prove her importance. She did not need to use her position to receive respect. Instead, she showed that true confidence comes from knowing who you are, even when others do not see it yet. For Michael, the experience became a moment of personal reflection. He realized that wearing a badge came with responsibility beyond following procedures. It meant understanding the people behind every situation. It meant remembering that every person had a story that could not be discovered through appearance alone. The encounter also caught the attention of Detective Sarah Mitchell, who had been reviewing the details of the situation. Sarah noticed something unusual. The interaction itself was not the only thing worth examining. She began asking a larger question about why certain assumptions appeared so quickly and whether there were patterns that needed a closer look. As she reviewed information connected to similar encounters, she discovered details that suggested this was not simply about one misunderstanding. There were signs that some decisions within the department had been influenced by poor judgment and a failure to follow the principles the system was supposed to protect. Vanessa learned about Sarah's findings and understood that the situation represented something larger than her own experience. She had the opportunity to walk away and forget the entire event, but she knew that real change often begins when people are willing to look deeper. She did not seek revenge. She sought accountability. The moment that began with a misunderstanding was becoming something much bigger. It was no longer only about a woman on a sport bike and an officer asking questions. It was becoming a lesson about responsibility, fairness, and the importance of ensuring that power is always guided by truth. Michael thought he had been evaluating Vanessa Carter that morning. But as the facts continued to unfold, everyone began to realize that the situation had been revealing something about the system itself. The truth had started with one quiet encounter, but now it was revealing a much larger story. In Arlington, Virginia, Detective Sarah Mitchell continued reviewing the details surrounding Vanessa Carter's experience. She understood that situations like this were rarely about one single moment. They were often connected to decisions, habits, and patterns that developed over time. What began as a question about one motorcycle rider had become a deeper examination of how people used judgment and responsibility. Vanessa Carter followed the investigation carefully, but she remained focused on the same principle she had always believed in. The purpose of justice was not to punish people for mistakes, but to make sure the truth was understood and improvements were made when problems appeared. Detective Sarah discovered information that raised serious concerns. The encounter involving Vanessa was not an isolated moment of misunderstanding. There were records showing similar situations where people had been judged too quickly based on incomplete information. Each situation appeared different on the surface, but together they revealed a troubling pattern. Sarah knew that facts had to guide the investigation. She did not want assumptions to replace evidence, because that would create the same problem she was trying to examine. Michael Reynolds followed the investigation with a different perspective than before. He was no longer only thinking about the morning he stopped Vanessa. He was thinking about every interaction he had experienced throughout his career. He began asking himself questions he had never asked before. Had he always taken enough time to understand the person in front of him? Had he always separated facts from assumptions? The experience with Vanessa had changed the way he viewed his responsibility. He realized that a badge was not only a symbol of authority, it was a reminder that every decision affected real people. Vanessa's identity as a federal judge had opened the door to a deeper conversation, but she knew the focus should not remain on her title. The real issue was whether every person received the same level of fairness, regardless of who they were or what others expected them to be. She wanted the system to become stronger, not because of what happened to her, but because other people deserved the same respect. As Sarah continued examining the information, she discovered that the concerns reached beyond individual decisions. There were signs that certain people within the system had created an environment where quick assumptions were sometimes accepted instead of questioned. The investigation began moving toward a larger review of accountability and responsibility. The people involved could no longer ignore the questions that had surfaced. The moment that started with a woman on a sport bike had become a reflection of something much bigger. It showed how easily a person could be underestimated and how important it was to look beyond appearances. Vanessa never wanted to be remembered only as the federal judge who revealed a hidden identity. She wanted the lesson to be about something greater. Justice was not about recognizing powerful people after discovering their status. Justice was about treating every person with fairness before knowing anything about them. And as the investigation continued, the truth was beginning to expose a system that needed to look honestly at itself. The truth had moved beyond one encounter, one conversation, and one person's experience. In Arlington, Virginia, the investigation led by Detective Sarah Mitchell continued to reveal a deeper understanding of how important accountability was inside any system built on trust. What started when Vanessa Carter was questioned on her sport bike had become a moment that forced many people to look beyond appearances and examine the decisions that shaped their actions. Sarah carefully reviewed every piece of information connected to the investigation. She understood that emotions could influence opinions, but facts had to guide the process. The goal was not to create blame without understanding. The goal was to discover what happened, why it happened, and how the system could become better. As more details were reviewed, a larger pattern began to appear. Some individuals had become too comfortable making quick conclusions without taking the time to understand the complete situation. Small decisions that seemed insignificant at first could create serious consequences when repeated over time. The investigation revealed that the problem was not only about one interaction. It was about the importance of ensuring that every person received the same level of fairness and respect. Michael Reynolds followed the developments closely. The experience had changed the way he viewed his own role. He had always believed that responsibility came from following procedures, but now he understood that responsibility also came from understanding people. A uniform could represent authority, but it also represented a promise to act with fairness. He began to recognize that the strongest form of professionalism was not always about having the right answer immediately. Sometimes it was about being willing to listen, learn, and correct mistakes. Vanessa Carter remained involved, but she never allowed the situation to become about personal recognition. She did not want people to focus only on the fact that she was a federal judge. She wanted them to understand the larger message. A person should not need an impressive title to receive respectful treatment. Every individual deserved to be heard before being judged. That belief had guided her throughout her legal career, and it guided her now. The investigation eventually reached people who had previously believed that certain actions would never be questioned. They realized that accountability was not about one person having power over another. It was about ensuring that everyone within a system followed the same standards. The discovery created uncomfortable conversations, but those conversations were necessary. Real improvement often begins when people are willing to acknowledge problems instead of ignoring them. For the community watching from the outside, the story became a powerful reminder. The woman on the sport bike was never just a rider. The officer with the badge was never just an authority figure. Both were people connected by a moment that revealed something much larger about fairness and responsibility. Vanessa had entered that morning expecting nothing more than a peaceful ride. Instead, she became part of a moment that encouraged reflection and change. The truth had not only revealed who she was, it had revealed what the system needed to become. And as the investigation moved closer to its conclusion, everyone involved understood one thing clearly. Justice was not defined by who held the most power. Justice was defined by whether that power was used with integrity. The story that began with a quiet ride through Arlington, Virginia, ended with a lesson that reached far beyond one street and one conversation. Vanessa Carter had started that morning simply wanting a peaceful moment away from the demands of her career. She never expected that a short encounter would become a powerful reminder about fairness, responsibility, and the importance of seeing people beyond first impressions. After the investigation revealed the deeper issues within the system, changes began to take place. The people involved had to confront difficult questions about judgment, accountability, and the responsibility that came with every decision they made. For Officer Michael Reynolds, the experience became a turning point. He did not remember the day because Vanessa Carter was a federal judge. He remembered it because he learned a lesson that no title could teach. He learned that every person had a story that deserved to be understood before conclusions were made. The badge he wore gave him authority, but it also gave him a responsibility to use that authority with patience and fairness. Michael understood that true professionalism was not measured by how quickly someone could make a decision. It was measured by the willingness to make the right decision after considering the complete truth. Detective Sarah Mitchell continued working to ensure that the lessons from the investigation were not forgotten. She believed that systems improved when people were willing to recognize problems and create better standards for the future. The goal was not simply to look back at what happened. The goal was to build a future where every person could expect to be treated with dignity from the beginning. Vanessa returned to her responsibilities as a federal judge, continuing the work she had always done. She did not seek attention for what happened. She did not want people to remember only the moment when others discovered her identity. She wanted them to remember the message behind it. A person's value should never depend on whether others recognize their achievements, their position, or their influence. Respect should exist before any introduction is made. The image of Vanessa standing beside her sport bike remained a powerful symbol. To some people, she had looked like someone they could easily misunderstand. But the truth revealed something completely different. She was a person who had dedicated her life to justice, standing in a moment that showed why justice mattered. The experience changed everyone who witnessed it. Some learned that assumptions could create unfair situations. Others learned that accountability was necessary for progress. And Vanessa reminded everyone that dignity did not come from a title or position. It came from being human. In the end, the greatest lesson was not about a motorcycle, a badge, or a courtroom. It was about the choice every person makes when they meet someone they do not know. They can judge quickly based on what they see, or they can take the time to discover the truth. Because sometimes the person who appears to have the least power is the person carrying the greatest responsibility. And sometimes, the moment people finally see the truth is the moment they understand what justice was meant to be.